Picture this. A quiet girl gets her shirt viciously torn by cruel bullies during a livestream watched by thousands, only to unleash devastating combat techniques that leave her attackers sprawled on the concrete in seconds. This is the extraordinary story of hidden military training, explosive justice, and a daughter's promise to honor her fallen Navy SEAL father. What happens next will leave you speechless and restore your faith in the power of inner strength. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The sprawling campus of Riverside Valley High School buzzed with the familiar chaos of teenage life as students navigated between classes under the warm California sun. Located in a diverse community where military families lived alongside working-class residents and affluent transplants, the school reflected the complex social dynamics of modern America. The main courtyard served as an unofficial gathering place where different social circles collided, creating an environment where privilege and struggle existed side by side. Palm trees swayed gently in the afternoon breeze, while students clustered around picnic tables, their conversations mixing English and Spanish in the multicultural tapestry that defined this corner of Southern California. The school's architecture spoke to both functionality and aspiration, with modern brick buildings connected by covered walkways that provided shade during the intense summer months. Security cameras dotted the campus, a reminder of contemporary concerns, while colorful murals painted by art students celebrated the community's diversity and military heritage. The nearby naval base cast a long shadow over the area, with many families connected to military service, creating a unique blend of transient populations and deep-rooted community bonds. In this vibrant yet divided environment, social hierarchies formed along predictable lines. The affluent students, many from families who had relocated to California for business opportunities, dominated the school's social media presence and extracurricular activities. Their designer clothes and latest technology created an invisible barrier that separated them from the children of service members and local working families. The cafeteria tables told the story clearly, with distinct groups maintaining their territories while teachers and administrators tried to promote unity across economic and cultural divides. Among the sea of faces moving through Riverside Valley's corridors was Sofia Martinez, a 16-year-old junior whose presence seemed to fade into the background despite her natural beauty. Her petite frame moved with unconscious grace through the crowded hallways, but she deliberately kept her dark hair loose around her face, creating a shield that allowed her to observe without being observed. While her classmates showcased the latest fashion trends, Sofia wore simple jeans and modest tops, her clothing choices reflecting both economic necessity and a desire to remain invisible in a world that often felt overwhelming. Sofia's backpack, worn but meticulously maintained, carried not just textbooks but the weight of responsibility that came with being the daughter of a single mother working double shifts to keep their small family afloat. Her notebooks were filled with precise handwriting, evidence of the discipline instilled by a father she had lost 4 years earlier, when Staff Sergeant David Martinez made the ultimate sacrifice during a classified operation overseas. The military values of honor, courage, and commitment lived on in his daughter, though she carried them quietly, away from the prying eyes of peers who might not understand the depth of loss that shaped her daily existence. To most students at Riverside Valley, Sofia Martinez was simply another scholarship kid, trying to blend in among the more privileged population. They saw her worn textbooks, her careful management of lunch money, and her reluctance to participate in expensive social activities as signs of someone who didn't quite belong in their world. What they couldn't see was the strength that ran through her veins, the legacy of a man who had taught her that true power came not from dominance, but from the ability to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Her hazel eyes, inherited from her father, held depths that spoke of maturity beyond her years, shaped by experiences that her classmates couldn't imagine. While they worried about weekend parties and social media followers, Sofia carried the memory of folded flags and military honors, of late-night conversations with a father who knew the world could be dangerous and wanted to prepare his daughter for whatever challenges might come. The discipline he had instilled in her showed in small ways throughout her day, from the way she maintained perfect posture to the quiet confidence with which she approached her studies. The contrast between Sofia's humble presence and the school's social elite became most apparent when Ashley Coleman entered any room. At 17, Ashley commanded attention with the ease of someone born into privilege and accustomed to having her desires fulfilled without question. Her platinum blonde hair was always perfectly styled, framing features that seemed designed for the camera phone that rarely left her hand. As one of the school's most popular social media influencers, Ashley had built a following of over 50,000 teenagers who hung on her every word and tried to emulate her lifestyle. Ashley's influence extended far beyond digital platforms into the real-world social structure of Riverside Valley High School. Her father, a successful real estate developer with political connections, had donated generously to the school's athletic programs and facilities, ensuring that his daughter enjoyed special treatment from administrators who understood the value of maintaining relationships with powerful families. Her mother, a former beauty queen turned philanthropist, had taught Ashley that appearance and perception mattered more than substance, lessons that Ashley had internalized and weaponized with devastating effectiveness. The Coleman family's wealth manifested in Ashley's daily presentation, from her designer handbags to her luxury car that occupied a prime parking spot in the student lot. Her followers, Chelsea Morrison and Morgan Phillips, came from similarly privileged backgrounds and served as both audience and amplifiers for Ashley's influence. Together, they formed a triumvirate of teenage power that determined social trends and decided who was worthy of acceptance in their carefully curated world. Ashley's cruelty wasn't born from malice alone, but from a twisted sense of superiority that had been nurtured by years of getting her way without consequences. She viewed students like Sophia as reminders of a world she preferred not to acknowledge, where people struggled financially and couldn't simply buy their way out of problems. Her social media content often featured subtle mockery of classmates who didn't meet her standards, disguised as humor but designed to reinforce the social boundaries that kept her at the top of the hierarchy. The collision between these two worlds was inevitable, building tension like storm clouds gathering on a clear day. Sophia's quiet dignity and academic excellence threatened Ashley's narrative that worth was determined by wealth and social status. More concerning to Ashley was the way some students seemed drawn to Sophia's authentic kindness, her willingness to help struggling classmates with homework or offer encouragement to those facing their own challenges. In Ashley's mind, this represented a dangerous alternative to the power structure she had worked so hard to establish and maintain. The dynamics between these two young women reflected larger tensions within the school community, where military families often found themselves caught between their values of service and sacrifice and a civilian culture that sometimes failed to understand or appreciate their contributions. Sophia represented everything Ashley couldn't comprehend: strength without ostentation, dignity without privilege, and purpose that extended beyond personal gratification. This fundamental disconnect would soon explode into a confrontation that would change both their lives forever. What neither Ashley nor her followers understood was that beneath Sophia's quiet exterior lay training that would have impressed even the most elite military units. Every morning at 5:30, while her classmates slept comfortably in their beds, Sophia made her way to the Valley Fitness and Martial Arts Center, a converted warehouse where former military personnel and law enforcement officers maintained their physical and mental edge. Under the guidance of Coach Rebecca Torres, a former Marine who had served alongside Sophia's father in joint operations, she continued the training that David Martinez had begun when his daughter was just 8 years old. The early morning sessions were sacred time for Sophia, connecting her to her father's memory while building the skills he had insisted she would need to navigate a dangerous world. Coach Torres pushed her through rigorous Krav Maga drills designed for real-world combat situations, teaching her to neutralize threats quickly and efficiently. The Israeli fighting system, developed for military use, emphasized practical techniques over flashy demonstrations, preparing practitioners to survive encounters where their lives might depend on their training. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu formed the second pillar of Sophia's martial arts education, providing her with ground-fighting skills that complemented the stand-up techniques of Krav Maga. Rolling with partners twice her size had taught her to use leverage and technique to overcome physical disadvantages, lessons that extended far beyond the training mats. Her father had chosen these disciplines specifically because they emphasized practical application over sport, preparing his daughter not for competitions, but for real-world situations where she might need to protect herself or others. The physical training was only part of Sophia's education in what her father had called tactical awareness. David Martinez had taught his daughter to observe her environment constantly, to identify potential threats before they developed, and to plan escape routes from any location. These skills had become second nature to Sophia, allowing her to navigate the social battlefield of high school with the same strategic thinking her father had applied to military operations overseas. Most importantly, David Martinez had instilled in his daughter a warrior's code that emphasized protection of the innocent and proportional response to threats. He had taught her that true strength came from restraint, that the ability to inflict damage carried with it the responsibility to use that power wisely. These lessons echoed in Sophia's mind as she went about her daily routine, a moral compass that guided her actions even when faced with provocation that might have driven others to react with violence. The secrecy surrounding Sophia's training wasn't just about maintaining her low profile at school. It was a strategic decision that honored her father's memory while protecting her family's privacy. Maria Martinez worked exhausting shifts as an ICU nurse, often leaving her daughter to navigate the challenges of adolescence with minimal supervision. She trusted Sophia's judgment and discipline, but she also worried about the attention that might come if people knew about her daughter's unusual skills. In their small apartment in the Meadowbrook complex, military memorabilia served as constant reminders of the man who had shaped both their lives. David Martinez's service ribbons and commendations occupied a place of honor above the modest television, while photographs captured moments of family happiness that felt both precious and painfully distant. His presence lingered in the values he had instilled, the traditions he had established, and the love that continued to guide his widow and daughter through their daily struggles.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
The contrast between the Martinez family's modest circumstances and the wealth displayed by students like Ashley Coleman couldn't have been starker. While Ashley complained about which luxury car to drive to school, Sophia took public transportation, using the commute time to complete homework or study for tests that could determine her future educational opportunities. While Ashley shopped for designer clothes without considering the cost, Sophia carefully managed her small allowance and wore items until they were beyond repair. Despite these challenges, or perhaps because of them, Sophia had developed a strength of character that impressed teachers and coaches who took the time to look beyond surface appearances. Her academic performance consistently ranked among the top 10% of her class, achieved through determination and disciplined study habits that reflected her military upbringing. She approached challenges with the same systematic thinking her father had taught her, breaking complex problems into manageable components and working through them with patient persistence. The social isolation that came with her economic circumstances had taught Sophia to be self-reliant in ways that her more privileged classmates couldn't understand. While they navigated social dramas and relationship complications, she focused on goals that extended beyond high school: college scholarships, career opportunities, and the chance to honor her father's memory through service to others. Her maturity and focus sometimes made her seem older than her 16 years, but they also provided stability in an environment where teenage emotions often ruled decision-making. As the weeks progressed through the fall semester, the inevitable confrontation between these two worlds approached like a slow-motion collision. Ashley's need to maintain her social dominance increasingly fixated on Sophia's quiet confidence, while Sophia's presence served as an unwitting challenge to the superficial values that Ashley represented. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reveal the true nature of both young women and forever change the social dynamics at Riverside Valley High School. Neither girl fully understood the forces that were drawing them toward conflict, but both felt the tension building in the subtle interactions that defined their shared environment. Ashley's followers began to notice Sophia more frequently, making small comments about her clothes or her habits that suggested their leader's growing obsession with the quiet girl who refused to acknowledge their superiority. Meanwhile, Sophia's instincts, honed by her father's training and Coach Torres's guidance, warned her that trouble was approaching, though she couldn't yet predict the form it would take. The countdown to confrontation continued with each passing day, as two very different approaches to strength and power prepared to collide in a moment that would define both young women's understanding of who they truly were and who they wanted to become. In the halls of Riverside Valley High School, beneath the surface of teenage normalcy, forces were aligning for a confrontation that would test everything Sophia Martinez had learned about honor, courage, and the true meaning of strength. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Martinez apartment as Sophia quietly prepared for another day at Riverside Valley High School. Her alarm had buzzed at 5 in the morning, but she had been awake for 20 minutes already. A habit inherited from her father, who had taught her that discipline began with controlling your first moments of consciousness. The small two-bedroom apartment felt even more cramped in the early morning light. With her mother's nursing uniforms hanging on the bedroom door and medical textbooks scattered across the kitchen table where Maria had fallen asleep, studying for her continuing education courses, Sophia moved through her morning routine with military precision, each action deliberate and efficient. Her workout clothes lay folded exactly where she had placed them the night before, and her school bag was packed and ready by the front door. The reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a young woman who had learned to carry burdens that would have crushed many of her peers. Dark circles under her eyes spoke to the late nights spent helping her mother study or working on her own assignments, but her posture remained straight and her movements retained the fluid grace that came from years of martial arts training. The photograph on her dresser showed a younger version of herself standing between her parents at a military ceremony, her father's uniform crisp and proud while her mother beamed with the joy of a woman who had found her perfect partner. David Martinez's eyes held the same intensity that now burned in his daughter's gaze, though tempered with the warmth of a man who understood that strength without compassion was merely brutality. The Purple Heart citation beside the photograph served as a daily reminder of the sacrifice he had made and the legacy he had left for his family to carry forward. Sophia's morning training session at Valley Fitness began with meditation, a practice her father had insisted was as important as physical conditioning. Sitting cross-legged on the worn mats, she cleared her mind of the anxieties that plagued most teenagers and focused on the breathing techniques that Coach Torres had refined from her military experience. The meditation served multiple purposes, centering her thoughts for the challenges ahead, honoring her father's memory through mindful practice, and preparing her body for the intense physical demands of her training routine. Coach Rebecca Torres watched Sophia with the critical eye of someone who had trained elite soldiers for combat deployment. The former Marine recognized something special in David Martinez's daughter, a combination of natural athleticism and mental toughness that couldn't be taught but could be refined through proper guidance. Torres had made a promise to her fallen comrade to look after his family, but what had begun as an obligation had evolved into genuine admiration for the young woman who approached her training with the dedication of a professional warrior. The Krav Maga drills that followed were designed to build muscle memory for situations where thinking time was a luxury Sophia might not have. Torres called out scenarios while Sophia responded with devastating efficiency: knife attack from the front, chokehold from behind, multiple attackers in a confined space. Each technique was practiced until it became instinctive, her body moving with the deadly precision that had made Israeli Special Forces legendary for their close-quarters combat effectiveness. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu formed the second phase of her training, requiring a different kind of mental approach that emphasized patience and strategy over explosive violence. Rolling with training partners who outweighed her by 50 pounds or more, Sophia learned to use leverage and technique to neutralize physical advantages that seemed insurmountable. The gentle art, as it was known to practitioners, taught her that every position offered opportunities for escape or reversal if she remained calm and thought tactically about her next move. What set Sophia apart from other martial artists her age was the practical application that Torres insisted upon in every training session. Unlike tournament competitors who focused on scoring points according to artificial rules, Sophia trained for real-world encounters, where the only rule was survival. Torres had seen too many technically proficient fighters fail in actual combat because they had been conditioned to fight within the constraints of sport rather than the chaos of genuine violence. The psychological component of Sophia's training was perhaps the most crucial element that separated her from typical teenage martial artists. Torres constantly emphasized situational awareness, teaching her to identify potential threats before they escalated to violence. This training had become second nature during her daily navigation of high school social dynamics, where she observed the subtle signs of brewing conflict with the same attention her father had paid to enemy activity in hostile territories overseas. Despite the intensity of her morning training, Sophia never allowed her martial arts practice to interfere with her academic responsibilities. She maintained a perfect attendance record and consistently ranked among the top students in her class, understanding that her father's sacrifice had been made partly to ensure she would have educational opportunities that could lift her family out of their current economic circumstances. Her teachers saw her as a model student, quiet, respectful, and incredibly hardworking, though none of them suspected the depth of strength that lay beneath her modest exterior. The contrast between Sophia's morning discipline and the casual approach most of her classmates took toward their daily routines reflected fundamental differences in how they viewed responsibility and preparation. While Ashley Coleman spent her mornings choosing between multiple designer outfits and updating her social media accounts with carefully staged content, Sophia was developing skills that could save her life or the lives of others. The divergent paths these young women followed each morning set the stage for the inevitable collision that was building with each passing day. Sophia's relationship with her mother was complicated by the demands of their financial situation and the grief that still hung over their small family like a persistent fog. Maria Martinez worked double shifts at the hospital, not just to pay their bills, but to fund Sophia's martial arts training and maintain the health insurance that allowed them to live without the constant fear of medical bankruptcy. The exhaustion in her mother's eyes when she returned from work broke Sophia's heart, but also strengthened her resolve to excel academically and eventually provide a better life for both of them. Conversations between mother and daughter often took place in the brief moments when their schedules overlapped, usually in the kitchen over hastily prepared meals, or during the drive to school when Maria's shift schedule allowed her to provide transportation. These precious minutes were filled with updates about classes, work gossip from the hospital, and carefully neutral discussions about Sophia's training that avoided dwelling too deeply on the reasons her father had insisted his daughter learn to fight. Maria Martinez had initially resisted the idea of her young daughter learning such violent skills, but David's quiet insistence in the realities of their neighborhood had eventually convinced her that self-defense training was a practical necessity rather than a paranoid precaution. After his death, she had continued supporting Sophia's martial arts education, partly to honor his memory, and partly because she recognized that her work schedule left her daughter alone more often than any mother would prefer. The financial strain of maintaining Sophia's training while managing their basic living expenses required constant sacrifice and careful budgeting that would have been incomprehensible to families like the Colemans. Maria clipped coupons, bought generic groceries, and drove a car that required frequent repairs, all to ensure that her daughter could continue the training that David had considered essential for her survival and development. The monthly payment to Valley Fitness represented a significant portion of their discretionary income, but Maria never complained or suggested that they might need to make different choices. Sophia understood the sacrifices her mother made and felt the weight of that responsibility in everything she did. Her perfect academic record wasn't just about personal achievement. It was about justifying the investment her family was making in her future and honoring the memory of a father who would believe she was capable of greatness. The pressure to succeed was enormous, but she channeled it into motivation, rather than allowing it to become a source of anxiety that might interfere with her performance. The social isolation that came with her family's circumstances was perhaps the most difficult aspect of Sophia's high school experience. While her classmates made plans for expensive weekend activities or casual shopping trips that could cost more than her family spent on groceries in a week, Sophia found herself declining invitations with excuses that became increasingly transparent over time. The few genuine friendships she had formed were with other students from military or working-class families who understood the constraints that shaped her choices. Jake Thompson had become something of an ally during their sophomore year, bonding over their shared status as scholarship students who didn't quite fit into the affluent culture that dominated Riverside Valley High School. His father worked construction while his mother cleaned houses, and he understood the careful calculations that went into every purchase decision and the way financial limitations could make teenagers feel isolated from their peers. Their friendship was built on mutual respect and shared experiences, rather than the superficial connections that seemed to drive most high school relationships. Together, Sophia and Jake navigated the complex social terrain of their school with the wariness of soldiers moving through potentially hostile territory. They ate lunch at a table near the library where they could study while eating and avoid the elaborate social dramas that played out in the main cafeteria seating areas. Their conversations ranged from academic subjects to their families' histories, but they rarely discussed their future plans in detail, perhaps because both understood that their paths would be determined by scholarship opportunities and economic necessities, rather than personal preferences. The discipline that governed Sophia's daily routine extended to every aspect of her life, from her meticulously organized locker to her habit of completing assignments days before they were due. This organizational approach was another legacy from her father, who had taught her that preparation was the foundation of success in any endeavor. Her notebooks were models of neatness and efficiency, with color-coded sections and detailed notes that reflected the systematic thinking he had encouraged since she was old enough to hold a pencil. What her classmates interpreted as obsessive behavior was actually tactical preparation for an uncertain future where every advantage might prove crucial. Sophia understood that her grades were her primary weapon in the battle for college scholarships, and she approached her studies with the same intensity that characterized her martial arts training. Every test was a mission to be planned and executed flawlessly. Every assignment an opportunity to demonstrate the competence that would eventually lift her family out of their current circumstances. The contrast between Sophia's focused approach to education and the casual attitude many of her wealthier classmates displayed toward their academic opportunities. Sometimes frustrated teachers who recognized her potential but worried about the pressure she placed on herself. They saw a young woman who seemed older than her years, carrying responsibilities that should have been shared with adults but instead resting entirely on her slender shoulders. Some tried to encourage her to participate in social activities or take breaks from her intensive schedule, but Sophia politely declined, understanding that relaxation was a luxury she couldn't afford. Ashley Coleman's growing awareness of Sophia Martinez began as casual observation but gradually evolved into something more focused and potentially dangerous. The popular influencer had initially dismissed the quiet girl as irrelevant to her social sphere, but certain incidents had begun to capture her attention in ways that made her uncomfortable. During a particularly challenging calculus exam, Ashley had noticed Sophia finishing confidently while other students struggled, displaying an academic competence that contradicted Ashley's assumption that scholarship students were somehow inferior to their wealthier peers. More troubling to Ashley was the way some students seemed to gravitate towards Sophia, despite her lack of social media presence or expensive possessions. The quiet girl's genuine kindness and willingness to help struggling classmates with their studies had earned her respect among a growing circle of students who appreciated authenticity over artificial influence. This represented a threat to the social order that Ashley had worked carefully to establish and maintain throughout her high school career. Ashley's initial attempts to assert her dominance over Sophia had been subtle. Dismissive comments about her clothing choices, exclusion from group projects when possible, and the kind of social microaggressions that popular students use to reinforce hierarchies without attracting adult attention. However, Sophia's complete indifference to these tactics frustrated Ashley and suggested that more direct action might be necessary to maintain her position at the top of the school's social structure. The tension between these two young women reflected broader conflicts within the school community about values, priorities, and what truly mattered in preparing students for adult life. Ashley represented the belief that image and connections were the keys to success, while Sophia embodied the conviction that hard work and authentic character would ultimately prove more valuable. These competing philosophies were destined to clash in ways that would test both young women's understanding of their own strength and values. Chelsea Morrison and Morgan Phillips, Ashley's loyal followers, began to take their cues from their leader's increasing focus on Sophia Martinez. They started making subtle comments about the girl's worn backpack, her habit of bringing lunch from home instead of buying expensive cafeteria meals, and her tendency to study during free periods rather than socializing. These observations were shared with the casual cruelty that characterized much of teenage social behavior, but they were building towards something more deliberate and potentially devastating. The three popular girls had perfected the art of social warfare through years of practice, understanding how to use exclusion, ridicule, and public embarrassment to maintain their positions, while avoiding the kind of obvious bullying that might attract administrative intervention. Their tactics relied on plausible deniability and the complicity of bystanders who were either too intimidated to intervene or too invested in maintaining their own social standing to risk challenging the established order. What Ashley and her followers didn't understand was that their target had been trained to recognize and respond to threats with a precision that few teenagers could match. Sophia's situational awareness, honed through years of martial arts training and her father's tactical instruction, allowed her to observe the subtle signs of escalating aggression with the same attention a soldier might pay to enemy movement in hostile territory. She had identified the threat Ashley represented and was mentally preparing for the confrontation that seemed increasingly inevitable. The lunch period on that fateful Tuesday began like any other day, with students scattered across the courtyard and cafeteria according to their established social patterns. Sophia sat at her usual table with Jake, quietly eating the sandwich her mother had prepared the night before while reviewing notes for her afternoon chemistry test. The normalcy of the scene was deceptive, hiding the tension that had been building for weeks beneath the surface of typical teenage interactions. Ashley Coleman had chosen this particular day for her most ambitious live stream yet, planning to demonstrate her social dominance while entertaining her growing online audience with content that would generate maximum engagement. Her followers on various social media platforms had begun requesting more dramatic content, and she understood that maintaining her influence required constantly escalating the entertainment value of her posts. The quiet girl who seemed immune to normal social pressure represented an opportunity to create the kind of viral moment that could significantly expand her online presence. The convergence of these factors created perfect conditions for the confrontation that would change both young women's lives forever. Ashley's need to maintain her social media relevance, Sophia's quiet strength that threatened established hierarchies, and the broader tensions within their school community were all building toward a moment of truth that would reveal the real character of everyone involved. The stage was set for an explosion that would test everything Sophia had learned about honor, courage, and the proper use of strength in defending herself and others. As students finished their lunches and began preparing for afternoon classes, neither girl fully understood how dramatically their lives were about to change. The skills that Sophia had developed through years of disciplined training were about to be tested in the most public and consequential way possible, while Ashley's understanding of power and influence was about to collide with a reality that would shatter her assumptions about what truly mattered in determining strength and character. The approaching confrontation would serve as a crucible that revealed the true nature of both young women, testing their values, their courage, and their understanding of what it meant to be strong in a world where different kinds of power competed for dominance. In the halls and courtyards of Riverside Valley High School, the countdown to a life-changing moment continued, driven by forces that neither participant could fully control or completely understand. The incident that would transform both girls' understanding of themselves and their place in the world was now only minutes away, though neither could predict exactly how it would unfold or what consequences would follow. The training, the values, and the choices that had shaped their lives were about to be tested in the most dramatic and public way possible, creating a moment that would be remembered long after their high school careers had ended. Ashley's phone was fully charged and ready to capture whatever content might emerge from her planned confrontation, while Sophia's muscle memory was primed to respond to threats with the devastating efficiency her father and Coach Torres had drilled into her through thousands of hours of practice. The collision between these two worlds was now inevitable, requiring only the right spark to ignite an explosion that would change everything both young women thought they knew about strength, courage, and the true meaning of power. The moment of transformation began, not with dramatic music or slow-motion effects, but with the quiet click of Ashley's phone as she switched to live stream mode, while her followers Chelsea and Morgan positioned themselves strategically around the courtyard. The California sun beat down mercilessly on the concrete surfaces where dozens of students sat finishing their lunches, creating the perfect natural lighting for the content Ashley had planned to capture. Her follower count had been stagnating recently, and she understood that social media algorithms rewarded engagement above all else, particularly the kind of dramatic content that generated strong emotional responses from viewers. Sophia sat completely unaware of the digital trap being set around her, focused entirely on reviewing her chemistry notes, while mechanically eating the peanut butter sandwich her mother had prepared before leaving for her morning shift at the hospital. The practiced efficiency with which she consumed her lunch while studying demonstrated the time management skills that had become essential for someone juggling academic excellence with family responsibilities and intensive physical training. Her worn textbook lay open to a complex diagram of molecular structures, and she traced the chemical bonds with her finger while memorizing the properties that would be crucial for her afternoon examination. Jake Thompson noticed the subtle shift in energy around their usual lunch spot before Sophia did, his own survival instincts honed by years of navigating social hierarchies as a scholarship student from the wrong side of town. The way Ashley's crew was positioning themselves triggered warning signals in his mind, though he couldn't immediately identify the specific threat they represented. He considered warning Sophia about the unusual attention they were receiving, but hesitated because she seemed so focused on her studies, and he didn't want to interrupt her concentration unnecessarily. Ashley approached their table with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding attention wherever she went, her phone held at the perfect angle to capture both her own carefully composed expression and whatever reaction she might provoke from her target. The live stream was already active, with viewers beginning to comment on the developing situation, their messages creating a steady stream of encouragement for whatever drama Ashley was about to create. The immediate feedback from her audience served as both validation and pressure, pushing her toward escalating behavior that would satisfy their appetite for entertainment. The opening move came disguised as casual observation, with Ashley speaking loudly enough for her phone to capture every word while maintaining the plausible deniability that had served her well in previous encounters. She commented on Sophia's study habits with mock admiration, noting how dedicated she was to her academics, though the tone made it clear that such dedication was somehow pathetic rather than admirable. The subtle insult was designed to establish social dominance while providing content that her followers would find amusing without being overtly cruel enough to attract administrative attention. Sophia looked up from her textbook with the calm expression that had become her default response to social pressure, her hazel eyes meeting Ashley's blue ones with neither fear nor aggression, but simple acknowledgement that she was being addressed. The lack of visible reaction frustrated Ashley, who had expected either defensive anger or nervous submission that would have provided better content for her audience. Instead, she found herself facing someone who seemed completely unaffected by her presence, as if the social hierarchy that defined Ashley's entire world simply didn't exist in Sophia's perception. The failure of her initial approach forced Ashley to escalate more quickly than she had originally planned, moving from subtle mockery to more direct confrontation, while her online audience demanded increasingly dramatic content. She made disparaging comments about Sophia's clothing choices, pointing out the faded fabric of her jeans and the obvious age of her sneakers with the kind of detailed cruelty that demonstrated how carefully she had observed her target. Each comment was designed to reinforce the economic differences between them while entertaining viewers who found humor in watching someone being systematically humiliated. Chelsea and Morgan provided the supportive laughter that Ashley required for her performance, their reactions amplifying each insult while creating the impression that the entire school supported Ashley's behavior. The choreographed nature of their response had been perfected through months of similar encounters, where they had learned to provide just enough backup to make their leader appear popular and powerful without overshadowing her central role in any confrontation. Their positioning also served to intimidate potential defenders while creating clear camera angles for the livestream that was now attracting hundreds of viewers. Jake felt the familiar sick feeling that came with witnessing injustice while being powerless to intervene effectively, his own social position too precarious to risk challenging someone with Ashley's influence and connections. He wanted to defend his friend, but understood that any intervention on his part would likely make the situation worse for both of them, potentially marking him as another target for Ashley's campaign of social warfare. The paralysis that gripped him was shared by dozens of other students who recognized what was happening but felt unable to act without risking their own social standing. The turning point came when Ashley made the tactical error of reaching for Sophia's chemistry textbook, apparently intending to examine it more closely while making additional disparaging comments about her academic focus. The physical contact represented a line that Sophia's training had taught her to recognize as a significant escalation, triggering defensive protocols that had been drilled into her through thousands of hours of practice. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, reminding her that allowing small violations often led to larger ones, and that establishing boundaries early could prevent more serious confrontations later. Sophia's response was measured and controlled, her voice remaining calm as she asked Ashley to please not touch her belongings. But the steel beneath her polite words carried undertones that suggested this was not a request but a warning. The contrast between her soft-spoken manner and the unmistakable authority in her tone created cognitive dissonance that Ashley couldn't immediately process, challenging her assumptions about how their confrontation should unfold. For the first time since approaching the table, Ashley encountered genuine resistance rather than the submission or defensive anger she had expected. The livestream audience was responding enthusiastically to the developing conflict, their comments encouraging Ashley to push harder and create more dramatic content that would generate the kind of viral engagement she needed to maintain her social media relevance. The real-time feedback created a feedback loop that drove her toward increasingly aggressive behavior, even as warning signals in her subconscious suggested that this particular target might not respond according to her usual script. The pressure to perform for her audience was overwhelming her instincts for self-preservation. Ashley's decision to grab Sophia's shoulder and attempt to force her to stand represented the moment when verbal harassment crossed into physical assault, though she disguised the action as playful interaction that might seem innocent to casual observers. The contact was brief but deliberate, designed to establish physical dominance while providing content that would satisfy her audience's demand for escalating drama. She had used similar tactics successfully in previous encounters, relying on most students' reluctance to engage in physical confrontation to maintain her advantage. The grab was also the trigger that activated every defensive protocol that David Martinez had programmed into his daughter's reflexes through years of patient instruction and repetition. Sophia's response was immediate and devastating, her left hand intercepting Ashley's wrist while her right hand secured the girl's elbow, creating the leverage necessary for a technique that would neutralize the threat while minimizing the potential for serious injury. The movement was so smooth and practiced that most observers didn't immediately understand what had happened. Ashley found herself completely off balance as Sophia executed a perfect arm drag that redirected her momentum while maintaining complete control of the situation, demonstrating the kind of technical precision that took years to develop and could only be performed under pressure by someone with extensive training. The technique was designed to neutralize aggression without causing permanent damage, reflecting the ethical foundation that underpinned all of Sophia's martial arts education. Her father had taught her that true strength was demonstrated through restraint rather than excessive force. The most shocking aspect of Sophia's response was not its effectiveness, but its complete lack of visible emotion, as if she was simply solving a technical problem rather than defending herself against a physical attack. Her expression remained calm and focused while she controlled Ashley's movement with the kind of professional competence that suggested extensive experience with such situations. The contrast between her quiet demeanor and her devastating physical skills created a cognitive dissonance that left observers struggling to process what they had witnessed. Ashley's attempt to escalate further was met with increasingly sophisticated defensive techniques that demonstrated the depth of Sophia's training and the extent to which her father's instruction had prepared her for exactly this kind of confrontation. When Ashley tried to grab Sophia's hair in frustrated anger, she found her hand trapped in a joint lock that applied just enough pressure to discourage further aggression without causing injury that might result in serious legal consequences. The precision with which Sophia controlled the encounter was both impressive and terrifying to those who understood the implications. The livestream audience was exploding with comments and reactions as they watched their entertainment suddenly take an unexpected turn, with many viewers expressing shock at seeing the quiet girl effortlessly neutralize someone they had expected to dominate the encounter. The viral potential of the content was becoming apparent to Ashley, even as she found herself completely outmatched by an opponent she had seriously underestimated. Her phone continued recording from where it had fallen when Sophia's defensive techniques disrupted her careful camera positioning. Jake watched in amazement as his quiet friend demonstrated skills that seemed impossible for someone their age to possess, though he was smart enough to understand that such proficiency could only come from years of serious training under expert instruction. The revelation that Sophia was far more than she appeared forced him to reconsider everything he thought he knew about her background and her family's history. The defensive techniques she displayed were clearly military-grade skills, rather than the sport martial arts that most teenagers might encounter. Chelsea and Morgan found themselves frozen in shock as they watched their seemingly invincible leader being systematically neutralized by someone they had dismissed as a weak target, their entire understanding of social hierarchies crumbling, as they witnessed physical reality override the artificial power structures that had governed their high school experience. Neither girl had ever seen Ashley lose control of any situation, much less be physically dominated by someone they considered socially inferior. The confrontation reached its climax when Ashley's frustration and humiliation drove her to attempt a wild swing that would have connected with Sophia's face, if not for the defensive techniques that intercepted the attack and redirected it harmlessly away from its target. The attempted strike represented a clear escalation to serious violence that justified a more decisive response. Though Sophia's training emphasized using only the minimum force necessary to neutralize threats while protecting herself and others, Sophia's final technique was a modified hip throw that sent Ashley tumbling to the concrete with just enough force to end the confrontation without causing serious injury, demonstrating the kind of precise control that separated trained fighters from brawlers who relied on raw aggression. The throw was executed with textbook technique that would have impressed martial arts instructors, while achieving the immediate goal of stopping Ashley's attack and establishing clear dominance over the situation. The aftermath was immediate and dramatic, with Ashley sprawled on the concrete in shocked disbelief while dozens of students pulled out their phones to record the conclusion of a confrontation that had taken a completely unexpected turn. The viral potential was obvious to everyone present, though few understood the deeper implications of what they had witnessed or the broader forces that had been set in motion by the encounter. Sophia stood calmly over her defeated opponent, her breathing barely elevated despite the physical demands of the encounter. The silence that followed was broken by the growing murmur of excited conversation as students began processing what they had witnessed and sharing their interpretations with friends who had missed the action. Some expressed admiration for Sophia's unexpected skills, while others worried about the potential consequences of challenging someone with Ashley's social connections and family influence. The power dynamics that had governed their school were clearly shifting in ways that no one could fully predict. Ashley's humiliation was complete and public, recorded from multiple angles and already being uploaded to various social media platforms by students who understood the entertainment value of watching a bully receive unexpected comeuppance. Her carefully constructed image of invincibility had been shattered in front of her followers and peers, creating a crisis that threatened the foundation of her social media influence and her position within the school's hierarchy. Sophia's response to victory was characteristically understated, as she simply retrieved her textbook and prepared to leave for her afternoon classes as if nothing unusual had occurred. The calm professionalism with which she handled the situation's aftermath was almost as impressive as the physical skills she had displayed during the confrontation itself. Her father's training had prepared her not just for physical conflict but for the psychological challenges that followed any use of force. The broader implications of the encounter were only beginning to emerge as word spread throughout the school and beyond, carried by social media posts that would soon reach audiences far beyond Riverside Valley High School. The video footage captured from multiple angles would provide evidence of both Ashley's aggressive behavior and Sophia's measured response, though the interpretation of events would vary dramatically depending on the viewer's perspective and pre-existing biases. Teachers and administrators who had missed the actual confrontation began hearing conflicting reports about what had occurred, forcing them to investigate an incident that challenged their assumptions about which students represented potential problems and which ones needed protection. The revelation that quiet, studious Sophia Martinez possessed such advanced combat skills raised questions about her background and training that would require careful investigation and delicate handling. The transformation in how other students viewed Sophia was immediate and dramatic, with many beginning to reconsider their previous dismissal of someone they had seen as merely another scholarship student trying to blend in among more privileged peers. The demonstration of her capabilities had revealed depths that forced everyone to acknowledge they had seriously misjudged both her character and her potential. The quiet girl who had seemed almost invisible was suddenly the center of attention in ways that would fundamentally alter her high school experience. As students headed to their afternoon classes, the conversations were dominated by speculation about Sophia's background and training, with various theories emerging about how someone their age could have developed such advanced fighting skills. Some correctly guessed at a military family connection, while others created more elaborate explanations that reflected their own limited understanding of martial arts and self-defense training. The mystery surrounding her abilities only added to the fascination she now generated among her peers. Within 30 minutes of the confrontation, the video footage had exploded across every major social media platform, with multiple angles of Ashley's humiliation spreading like wildfire through teenage networks that thrived on dramatic content. The hashtags began forming organically as viewers struggled to categorize what they had witnessed. Shy Girl Fights Back, Martial Arts Revenge, and Bully Gets Owned, trending alongside more specific references to Riverside Valley High School that would soon draw unwanted attention from news outlets and internet investigators eager to identify the mysterious girl with the devastating fighting skills. The viral explosion reached far beyond the typical teenage audience that consumed high school drama content, attracting viewers from military communities who recognized the professional quality of Sophia's defensive techniques and began speculating about her training background in comment sections that quickly filled with theories about Navy SEAL families and military combat instruction. Veterans who had seen similar techniques in special operations training began sharing the videos within their own networks, adding credibility to speculation about Sophia's military connections, while inadvertently amplifying the story's reach. Sophia's attempt to attend her afternoon chemistry class as if nothing had changed was immediately disrupted by the reality of sudden internet fame, as students who had never acknowledged her existence before now stared openly and whispered among themselves while trying to reconcile the quiet girl they thought they knew with the warrior they had seen on their phones. Her teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, had seen the videos during her planning period and struggled to maintain normal classroom dynamics while processing the revelation that one of her most studious students possessed combat skills that seemed impossible for someone her age. The school administration found itself facing a crisis that their standard disciplinary procedures were completely unprepared to handle, as Principal Williams received calls from parents, media outlets, and district officials, all demanding explanations for an incident that had already generated millions of views across social media platforms. The fact that Ashley Coleman's family held significant influence in the community complicated any potential response, while the growing evidence of Sophia's military background raised questions about whether normal teenage discipline policies even applied to someone with her training. Maria Martinez was still completing her shift in the intensive care unit when her supervisor approached with unusual urgency, informing her that the hospital's security department had received multiple calls from reporters trying to verify information about her family and requesting interviews about her daughter's martial arts background. The nursing supervisor had deflected the inquiries, but warned Maria that the situation would likely require immediate attention when she finished her patient care responsibilities and could deal with what appeared to be a significant media crisis. The drive home from the hospital became a nightmare of anxiety for Maria as she listened to radio reports that mentioned Riverside Valley High School and tried to piece together what had happened to thrust her family into public attention they had spent years trying to avoid. Her phone buzzed constantly with calls from unknown numbers that she assumed were reporters, mixed with frantic messages from Sophia's school and neighbors who had seen the viral videos and wanted to confirm that the girl in the footage was indeed David Martinez's daughter. Coach Torres received the first call from a former military colleague who had recognized the techniques Sophia displayed in the viral videos, specifically identifying moves from both Krav Maga and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that indicated advanced training under professional instruction rather than casual martial arts classes. The conversation forced Torres to confront the reality that their carefully maintained secrecy about Sophia's abilities had been shattered in the most public way possible, potentially exposing the girl to attention from dangerous elements who might connect her skills to her father's classified military service. The immediate aftermath at school revealed the complex social dynamics that Sophia's demonstration of power had unleashed, as students who had previously ignored or dismissed her now approached with mixtures of admiration, fear, and curiosity that made normal interaction impossible. Some expressed genuine respect for her ability to defend herself against Ashley's aggression, while others seemed more interested in the entertainment value of her fighting skills or the social media celebrity that her viral fame might provide through association. Jake Thompson found himself thrust into an unwanted spotlight as Sophia's closest friend at school, fielding questions from classmates and reporters who assumed he must have known about her background and training. His genuine surprise at discovering her abilities actually made him more credible when he insisted that Sophia had never mentioned martial arts or military family connections, though his defense of her character helped establish the narrative that she was a normal student who had been forced to defend herself against unprovoked aggression. Ashley Coleman's response to her public humiliation was swift and vindictive, as she leveraged her family's connections and financial resources to launch a counterattack designed to destroy Sophia's reputation while salvaging her own social media empire. Her father's law firm began investigating potential criminal charges against Sophia for assault, while simultaneously working to suppress the most damaging footage of Ashley's aggressive behavior during the incident. The Coleman family's influence with local media outlets ensured that their version of events received prominent coverage alongside the viral videos. The narrative war that erupted across social media platforms reflected broader cultural tensions about bullying, self-defense, and the proper response to aggression, with opposing camps forming around different interpretations of the same footage. Ashley's supporters portrayed her as the victim of an unprovoked attack by someone with unfair physical advantages, while Sophia's defenders argued that the videos clearly showed Ashley initiating the confrontation and escalating it to physical violence before receiving appropriate defensive response. Media outlets struggled to balance their desire for compelling content with journalistic responsibility, as the story combines several elements that guaranteed audience engagement: high school drama, impressive fighting skills, military family background, and class conflict between privileged and working-class students. The fact that both girls were minors complicated coverage decisions, though the viral nature of the original videos made their identities impossible to protect through traditional means. The investigation into Sophia's background began revealing details about her father's military service that Maria had hoped would remain private, as internet researchers and journalists dug into public records that connected David Martinez to classified operations overseas. While the specific details of his missions remained protected, the confirmation that he had been a Navy SEAL added credibility to speculation about his daughter's training, while potentially exposing her to unwanted attention from foreign intelligence services or domestic extremist groups. The revelation of Sophia's military heritage forced a complete re-evaluation of the incident among school officials who had initially planned to suspend her for fighting, as they began to understand that her response to Ashley's aggression had been measured and professional rather than the result of teenage emotional volatility. The consultation with District Legal Counsel revealed that Sophia's actions could be classified as appropriate self-defense under California law, particularly given the clear video evidence of Ashley's role as the aggressor. Dr. Sarah Chen, a child psychologist specializing in military families, contacted the school district to offer her services after recognizing the unique challenges that Sophia would face as the daughter of a fallen Navy SEAL who had suddenly been thrust into public attention. Her expertise in trauma counseling and military family dynamics proved invaluable, as administrators tried to develop appropriate support systems for a student whose situation fell far outside their normal experience with teenage conflicts. The growing media attention forced Sophia to confront the reality that her carefully maintained privacy had been permanently shattered, as reporters camped outside her apartment complex and attempted to interview neighbors about her family's background and daily routines. The invasion of privacy was particularly traumatic for someone who had been trained to maintain operational security and avoid drawing attention that might compromise her safety or her mother's ability to provide for their family. Maria's return home became a gauntlet of reporters and camera crews that transformed their quiet neighborhood into a circus atmosphere that left both mother and daughter feeling exposed and vulnerable in ways they had never experienced before. The apartment that had served as their sanctuary from the outside world suddenly felt like a prison, with media attention making it impossible to maintain the normal routines that had provided stability since David's death. The conversation between Maria and Sophia that evening was one of the most difficult either had experienced since the notification of David's death, as they grappled with the consequences of decisions that seemed inevitable in retrospect, but had fundamentally altered their lives in ways that couldn't be undone. Maria's fear for her daughter's safety was balanced against pride in how she had handled herself during the confrontation, while Sophia struggled with guilt over exposing her family to attention they had worked so hard to avoid. Coach Torres arrived at their apartment after dark, using security protocols she had learned during her military service to avoid the media presence while delivering news that would further complicate their situation. The viral videos had attracted attention from government agencies who were concerned about operational security breaches related to David's classified service, requiring immediate consultation with military intelligence officers who needed to assess potential threats to national security interests. The meeting with intelligence officials revealed the extent to which David Martinez's service had involved sensitive operations that could still pose risks to his family if his daughter's abilities drew attention from hostile foreign interests. The officers explained that Sophia's public demonstration of advanced combat techniques had raised flags in multiple government databases, triggering security reviews that would affect their family's privacy and freedom of movement for the foreseeable future. The security briefing included warnings about potential threats from extremist groups who might target military families, foreign intelligence services interested in David's former operations, and domestic criminals who might view Sophia's viral fame as an opportunity for kidnapping or extortion. The officials recommended immediate relocation to a secure facility while threat assessments were completed, though they acknowledged that such measures would further disrupt lives that had already been traumatically altered by the day's events. Sophia's response to the security briefing demonstrated the maturity and tactical thinking that her father's training had developed, as she asked detailed questions about threat assessment procedures and protection protocols that impressed the intelligence officers, while confirming their suspicions about the extent of her military instruction. Her ability to process classified information and understand operational security requirements suggested that David had prepared his daughter for exactly this kind of situation. The decision to accept government protection was made easier by the escalating harassment from media outlets and internet trolls who had identified their address and began making increasingly invasive attempts to gather information about their family. The apartment that had been their home for 4 years was no longer safe or private, forcing them to abandon most of their possessions while relocating to a secure facility where they could receive proper protection while threat assessments were completed. The aftermath of Ashley Coleman's humiliation was equally dramatic but took different forms, as her family's wealth and influence provided protection from the worst consequences while creating new challenges related to her damaged social media empire and public reputation. The viral videos had exposed her behavior to adult scrutiny that her previous targets had been unable to generate, forcing her to confront accountability that her privileged background had always allowed her to avoid. The legal strategy developed by Ashley's father focused on portraying his daughter as the victim of excessive force, while minimizing coverage of her role in initiating and escalating the confrontation. However, the clear video evidence of her aggressive behavior made this narrative difficult to maintain, particularly as additional footage emerged, showing her previous bullying incidents that established a pattern of predatory behavior toward vulnerable students. The investigation into Ashley's social media history revealed a treasure trove of evidence documenting her systematic harassment of classmates, including several incidents that violated both school policies and state laws regarding cyberbullying and harassment. The discovery of this evidence shifted public opinion against her, while providing prosecutors with additional charges they could pursue if the Coleman family continued pushing for criminal action against Sophia. The transformation of public perception regarding both girls was swift and decisive, as initial sympathy for Ashley evaporated when additional evidence of her bullying behavior emerged, while Sophia's story resonated with audiences who understood the challenges facing military families and admired her restraint in using only necessary force to defend herself. The narrative that emerged portrayed Ashley as a privileged bully who had finally encountered someone she couldn't intimidate, while Sophia became a symbol of quiet strength and appropriate response to aggression. The long-term consequences for both families extended far beyond the immediate aftermath of their confrontation, as the viral incident fundamentally altered their relationships with their community and forced them to rebuild their lives around new realities they couldn't have anticipated. For the Martinez family, the exposure brought both support from military communities and dangerous attention from hostile elements, while the Coleman family faced social ostracism and legal challenges that their wealth couldn't easily resolve. Sophia's transformation from invisible student to public figure was complete but unwanted, as she struggled to maintain the values her father had taught her while adapting to circumstances that made normal teenage life impossible. The girl who had worked so hard to remain unnoticed now found herself at the center of national conversations about bullying, self-defense, and the challenges facing military families and civilian communities. The epilogue of their story was still being written, as both young women faced futures that had been irrevocably altered by a confrontation that lasted less than 5 minutes, but would define their lives for years to come. Sophia's journey toward college and career would now include security considerations and public attention that few teenagers ever experience, while Ashley faced the challenge of rebuilding a reputation that had been destroyed by her own choices and actions. The broader impact of their story extended beyond individual consequences to influence policy discussions about bullying prevention, military family support, and appropriate responses to school violence that would affect educational institutions across the country. The viral nature of their confrontation had created a case study that experts would analyze for years, while both girls continued growing up under scrutiny that neither had chosen but both would have to navigate. The final lesson of their encounter was perhaps the most important, that strength comes in many forms, but true power lies in using it wisely and with restraint, protecting others while maintaining the moral principles that separate warriors from bullies. Sophia Martinez had demonstrated that her father's legacy lived on not just in her fighting skills but in her character, while Ashley Coleman learned that privilege without responsibility eventually leads to consequences that money and influence cannot prevent. 2 years had passed since the incident that changed everything, and the secure government facility that had become Sophia Martinez's temporary home had gradually transformed into something resembling normalcy, though the teenager who emerged from those protected walls bore little resemblance to the quiet girl who had once tried to remain invisible at Riverside Valley High School. The intensive debriefings, security assessments, and psychological evaluations that had dominated the first months of her relocation had given way to a carefully structured educational program that prepared her for a future that would forever be shaped by her father's legacy and her own moment of viral fame. The private tutoring Sophia received from former military educators exceeded anything available at traditional high schools. With instructors who understood both the academic requirements for elite college admission and the unique security considerations that would follow her throughout her life. Her chemistry knowledge had advanced to college level under the guidance of a retired Air Force colonel who had spent decades developing explosive ordnance disposal techniques, while her literature studies were supervised by a former CIA analyst who taught her to recognize propaganda and misinformation with the same analytical skills she applied to poetry and prose. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the child psychologist specializing in military families who had been assigned to Sophia's case, watched with professional satisfaction as her young patient developed coping mechanisms for the trauma of sudden exposure and the ongoing stress of living under protection. The girl's resilience impressed everyone who worked with her, though Warren recognized that the apparent adjustment masked deeper struggles with identity, purpose, and the weight of expectations that came with being David Martinez's daughter in an increasingly complex world. The martial arts training that had caused all the trouble in the first place continued under even more rigorous conditions, as government instructors built upon the foundation that Coach Torres and her father had established, while adding techniques and tactics that reflected contemporary threats against high-value targets. Sophia's morning sessions now included advanced situational awareness, counter-surveillance methods, and emergency escape procedures that prepared her for dangers that extended far beyond schoolyard bullies or common criminals. Maria Martinez had struggled more than her daughter with the transition to protected life, finding herself dependent on government support systems that reminded her daily of the cost of her husband's service and the ongoing price their family paid for his dedication to protecting others. The nursing career that had provided both income and identity was temporarily suspended while security assessments continued, leaving her feeling useless and disconnected from the community service that had given meaning to her life since David's death. The apartment within the secure facility was larger and better appointed than their previous home, but Maria missed the independence and privacy that had allowed her to grieve and rebuild on her own terms. The constant presence of security personnel, however professional and considerate they tried to be, created an atmosphere of controlled existence that felt more like comfortable imprisonment than genuine protection. She understood the necessity but resented the loss of autonomy that had been achieved through years of struggle and sacrifice. Regular video calls with Coach Torres provided the only connection to their previous life that felt authentic and unmonitored, though even these conversations were subject to security protocols that limited discussion of certain topics and required advanced scheduling through government handlers. Torres had been cleared to continue serving as a mentor and emotional support system, but the spontaneous relationship that had developed between them was now subject to bureaucratic oversight that diminished its therapeutic value. The investigation into potential threats against the Martinez family had uncovered intelligence that justified their protection, while revealing the extent to which David's classified service continued to generate security concerns years after his death. Foreign intelligence services had indeed taken notice of Sophia's abilities and family background, while domestic extremist groups had identified her as a symbol of military values they opposed and elite training they resented. Agent Michael Chen, the lead protective services coordinator assigned to their case, had developed genuine respect for both mother and daughter while maintaining the professional distance required by his position. His background included protection details for other military families whose service had exposed them to ongoing risks, giving him perspective on the unique challenges facing the Martinez family while understanding the long-term nature of threats they would likely face throughout their lives. The psychological profile that emerged from months of evaluation painted a picture of a young woman who possessed exceptional potential for leadership and service, while carrying emotional burdens that would require ongoing support and understanding. Sophia's intelligence scores placed her in the top percentile of her age group, while her physical capabilities and tactical thinking demonstrated aptitudes that could serve her well in military or law enforcement careers if she chose to follow her father's path. Educational planning for Sophia's future involved considerations that extended far beyond typical college preparation, as her unique background and demonstrated abilities opened doors to opportunities that few teenagers could imagine, while simultaneously limiting her options due to security requirements and public recognition. Elite military academies expressed interest in her application, while Ivy League universities offered full scholarships that came with their own security and privacy challenges. The decision about her future education would ultimately rest with Sophia herself, though advisors encouraged her to consider institutions that could provide both academic excellence and appropriate security infrastructure for someone with her profile. The normal teenage experience of choosing colleges based on social preferences and campus aesthetics had been replaced by strategic planning that balanced educational objectives with operational security requirements and long-term career considerations. Ashley Coleman's life had taken a dramatically different trajectory following the incident that had destroyed her social media empire and exposed her behavior to adult scrutiny she had never before encountered. The legal consequences that her father's influence had initially deflected eventually caught up with her, as additional victims of her bullying came forward, and prosecutors built cases that even expensive lawyers couldn't easily dismiss through procedural challenges or character assassination. The civil lawsuit filed by 3 families whose children had been targeted by Ashley's systematic harassment campaign resulted in financial settlements that damaged the Coleman family's reputation within their affluent community, while establishing legal precedents for holding wealthy students accountable for cyberbullying and emotional abuse. The discovery process had revealed the extent of Ashley's online cruelty and her parents' awareness of behavior they had enabled rather than corrected. Mandatory community service and psychological counseling had become central features of Ashley's court-ordered rehabilitation, forcing her to confront the impact of her actions while developing empathy for victims she had previously viewed as entertainment opportunities. The privilege that had once protected her from consequences now felt like a barrier preventing her from forming authentic relationships with peers who viewed her with suspicion and adults who monitored her every interaction. The exclusive private school that Ashley attended following her suspension from Riverside Valley had strict policies regarding social media use and bullying behavior, creating an environment where her previous tactics for maintaining social dominance were impossible to employ. Surrounded by other wealthy students who had their own disciplinary issues, she found herself in an unfamiliar position as just another problem child rather than the queen bee she had been accustomed to being. Dr. Patricia Reeves, the court-appointed therapist working with Ashley, had seen many cases of privileged teenagers whose behavior escalated until they faced real consequences, and she recognized both the potential for genuine change and the likelihood of continued entitlement, depending on how seriously Ashley took the rehabilitation process. The girl's initial resistance to therapy had gradually given way to moments of genuine reflection, though her progress remained inconsistent and required ongoing reinforcement. The relationship between Ashley and her parents had become strained as they grappled with their own responsibility for enabling behavior that had ultimately damaged their family's reputation and financial standing. The discovery that their daughter's actions could result in serious legal and financial consequences had forced them to reconsider parenting approaches that had previously focused on providing advantages rather than teaching accountability and empathy for others. Jake Thompson had emerged from the incident as an unexpected beneficiary, as his loyal friendship with Sophia during her time of need had attracted positive attention from adults who recognized character traits that many teenagers lacked. Scholarship opportunities that had seemed unlikely before became available as his association with Sophia's story highlighted his own background and academic achievements to college admissions officers looking for students with genuine integrity. The temporary fame that came with being Sophia's closest friend at school had been both blessing and burden, as Jake found himself fielding interview requests and social media attention that he was completely unprepared to handle. His parents, both working-class individuals who valued privacy and hard work over public recognition, had helped him navigate the attention while maintaining focus on his education and future goals, rather than getting caught up in the celebrity aspects of his connection to the viral incident. The scholarship to Stanford University that Jake ultimately received was partially based on essays he wrote about loyalty, friendship, and the importance of standing by people who demonstrate genuine character even when it's not socially advantageous to do so. His college admissions counselor had noted that his authentic relationship with Sophia provided evidence of values that couldn't be manufactured or coached, making him an attractive candidate for institutions seeking students with real integrity. Coach Torres had used the publicity surrounding Sophia's story to advocate for increased support for military families and better recognition of the ongoing challenges faced by children whose parents made the ultimate sacrifice in service to their country. Her own military background provided credibility when she spoke to congressional committees and veteran support organizations about the need for comprehensive assistance programs that addressed not just immediate financial needs but long-term educational and security considerations. The martial arts program that Torres developed in the aftermath of the incident had attracted national attention and federal funding as a model for providing military children with both physical fitness training and emotional coping mechanisms that help them process trauma and develop confidence in civilian environments. The program's success had led to expansion opportunities that could benefit thousands of military families across the country. The investigation into David Martinez's death had been quietly reopened as part of the security assessment, with new resources and advanced forensic techniques revealing evidence that supported suspicions that his killing had been more than a random crime. While the full details remained classified, the family had been informed that justice was finally being served against those responsible for taking away their husband and father through targeted violence rather than the war-zone dangers he had willingly accepted. The media attention that had initially felt like invasion and violation had gradually evolved into opportunities for positive advocacy, as Sophia and her mother chose to selectively participate in interviews and documentaries that highlighted the sacrifices made by military families and the ongoing support needed by children who lost parents in service to their country. Their story had become a powerful tool for raising awareness about issues that often remained invisible to civilian communities. The documentary film that was eventually produced about their experience had won several awards while raising substantial funds for military family support organizations, demonstrating how personal tragedy could be transformed into broader social benefit when approached with wisdom and strategic thinking. The film's success had provided both financial resources and a platform for advocacy that extended their impact far beyond their individual circumstances. Educational institutions across the country had begun implementing anti-bullying programs inspired by Sophia's story, with curricula that emphasized the importance of standing up for others while using appropriate and proportional responses to aggression. The incident had become a case study in multiple academic disciplines, from social psychology to criminal justice to military family studies, providing learning opportunities that extended its impact for future generations. The romance novel that Maria Martinez had begun writing during the long months of protective custody had become an unexpected success, providing both emotional outlet and financial independence that reduced their family's dependence on government support, while creating new opportunities for advocacy and public speaking. The story drew on her experiences as a military wife and single mother, while avoiding classified details that could compromise security or privacy. Sophia's acceptance to the United States Naval Academy had been announced with great ceremony, though the decision to follow her father's path into military service had required extensive consultation with security experts and family counselors who wanted to ensure she was choosing her future based on genuine calling rather than perceived obligation to honor his memory. The Academy's commitment to providing appropriate security measures while allowing her to pursue normal cadet experiences had been crucial to the final decision. The leadership qualities that Sophia had demonstrated throughout her ordeal had impressed Academy admissions officers who recognized potential for exceptional service in someone who had already proven her ability to maintain composure under pressure while making ethical decisions in challenging circumstances. Her combination of academic excellence, physical capabilities, and demonstrated character made her an ideal candidate for the demanding program that would prepare her for naval officer responsibilities. The transformation of both young women served as powerful evidence that even the most traumatic experiences could become catalysts for positive growth when approached with appropriate support and genuine commitment to learning from mistakes and building character. Sophia's journey from invisible teenager to confident young leader had been painful but ultimately successful, while Ashley's reluctant evolution from entitled bully to someone capable of empathy demonstrated that change was possible even for those who seemed irredeemably selfish. The legacy of their confrontation extended far beyond their individual stories to influence policy discussions, educational practices, and cultural conversations about bullying, privilege, military family support, and appropriate responses to aggression that would affect countless other young people facing similar challenges. The viral moment that had seemed like a disaster at the time had ultimately become a catalyst for positive change that touched many lives and institutions. The final meeting between Sophia and Ashley had been arranged by their respective therapists as part of a restorative justice process that allowed both young women to achieve closure while demonstrating the growth they had experienced since their infamous encounter. The conversation had been difficult, but ultimately healing, with genuine apologies exchanged and mutual understanding achieved about the circumstances that had led to their conflict. Ashley's acknowledgement of her behavior and its impact had been sincere, while Sophia's forgiveness had been offered without diminishing the seriousness of what had occurred, or the ongoing consequences both families continued to face. The meeting had provided evidence that redemption was possible, even after very public failures, while demonstrating that accountability and genuine change could coexist with forgiveness and second chances. The scholarship fund, established in David Martinez's name, had provided educational assistance to dozens of military children while raising awareness about the ongoing needs of families affected by military service. The fund's success had created a lasting memorial that honored his sacrifice while providing practical support for others facing similar challenges, ensuring that his legacy extended beyond his individual service to benefit future generations. Sophia's graduation from the Naval Academy would occur with full military honors, attended by high-ranking officials who recognized both her individual achievements and her symbolic importance as a young woman who had overcome tremendous challenges while maintaining the values her father had instilled. Her commissioning as a naval officer would mark the completion of a journey that began with a traumatic confrontation but ultimately led to personal growth and service opportunities that would allow her to honor her family's legacy while making her own contributions to protecting others. The strength that Sophia had discovered within herself during that fateful lunch period had proven to be just the beginning of capabilities she continued to develop through training, education, and experience that prepared her for leadership roles she could never have imagined when she was simply trying to remain invisible at Riverside Valley High School. The quiet girl had indeed become a warrior, but more importantly, she had become a leader who understood that true strength comes from protecting others and serving causes greater than oneself. The morning sun reflected off the pristine white buildings of the United States Naval Academy as Midshipman Second Class Sophia Martinez completed her daily 5-mile run along the Severn River, her breathing steady and controlled despite the demanding pace that had left several of her classmates struggling to maintain formation. The physical conditioning that had begun in her father's memory and continued through Coach Torres's guidance had evolved into the kind of elite fitness that set her apart even among the exceptional athletes who populated the Academy's demanding program. 3 years had passed since her commissioning ceremony, where she had stood before admirals and dignitaries while her mother pinned the gold bars of an ensign onto her crisp white uniform, completing a transformation that had begun with a moment of violence in a high school courtyard, but had ultimately led to a career dedicated to protecting others. The shy girl who had once tried to remain invisible had become a naval intelligence officer, whose analytical skills and tactical thinking were already attracting attention from senior commanders who recognized exceptional potential in someone so young. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, Sophia's supervising officer at the Naval Intelligence Activity, had watched with professional satisfaction as her newest analyst demonstrated the kind of intuitive understanding of complex security situations that typically took years to develop. The psychological profile that had identified Sophia as a high-potential candidate during her academy years was proving accurate in operational settings where her combination of analytical intelligence and tactical awareness provided unique insights into emerging threats against American interests overseas. The classified briefing room where Sophia now spent most of her working hours was a far cry from the chemistry classroom where she had once studied molecular structures, though the same methodical approach that had made her an excellent student served her well when analyzing intelligence patterns and identifying potential security vulnerabilities. Her ability to process large amounts of information while maintaining focus on operational objectives had earned respect from colleagues who understood that such skills were rare even among highly trained intelligence professionals. The morning briefing focused on emerging threats in the Pacific Theater, where tensions between global powers created complex intelligence challenges that required both technical expertise and strategic thinking to address effectively. Sophia's contributions to the analysis demonstrated the kind of comprehensive understanding that impressed senior officers, while reflecting the broad educational foundation that her years at the Academy had provided through coursework that ranged from nuclear engineering to international relations. Captain Robert Hayes, the commanding officer who had recruited Sophia for the intelligence assignment, recognized in her the kind of officer who could bridge the gap between tactical operations and strategic planning that modern naval warfare increasingly required. Her background provided unique perspectives on the challenges facing military families, while her demonstrated ability to remain calm under pressure suggested potential for leadership roles that could significantly impact naval operations in years to come. The secure video conference that connected Sophia with intelligence analysts at bases around the world reflected the global nature of modern military service, where threats could emerge anywhere and required coordinated responses that drew on expertise from multiple commands and specialties. Her role in these discussions was still limited by her junior rank, but the quality of her analysis and the clarity of her presentations had earned her recognition as a rising star within the intelligence community. The personal relationships that Sophia had formed with fellow officers reflected the maturity and character that had been forged through her unique experiences, from the trauma of losing her father to the challenges of sudden public attention to the discipline required for success at the Naval Academy. Her colleagues respected both her professional competence and her personal integrity, creating the kind of bonds that were essential for effective military service in demanding operational environments. Lieutenant Jake Rodriguez, a former enlisted sailor who had earned his commission through the same pathway that Sophia's father had followed decades earlier, had become both mentor and friend as she navigated the complex social dynamics of military leadership. His background provided perspective on the enlisted experience that complemented her academy training, while his combat experience and overseas deployments offered insights into the practical applications of the intelligence work they performed together. The evening study sessions that had characterized Sophia's academy years had evolved into professional development activities that kept her current, with emerging technologies and evolving threats that could impact naval operations around the world. The discipline that her father had instilled, and that had been refined through years of martial arts training, served her well when balancing the demands of operational assignments with the ongoing education required for advancement within the intelligence specialty. Maria Martinez had transformed her own life in parallel with her daughter's military career, parlaying the success of her first novel into a writing career that provided both financial independence and a platform for advocating on behalf of military families who continued to face challenges that civilian communities often failed to understand. The royalties from her books had eliminated the financial stress that had dominated their lives for years, while creating opportunities for philanthropy that honored David's memory through practical support for other families. The foundation that Maria had established using proceeds from her writing focused on providing educational scholarships and counseling services for children who had lost parents in military service, addressing needs that government programs often overlooked, while building networks of support that helped families navigate grief and rebuild their lives. The organization's success had attracted corporate sponsorship and government funding that multiplied its impact far beyond what Maria could have achieved through individual effort alone. Regular communication between mother and daughter was maintained despite the security requirements and operational demands that limited contact during certain assignments, with both women understanding that their relationship had been strengthened rather than weakened by the challenges they had faced together. The forced separation during Sophia's protected custody had taught them to value their connection while developing independence that served them well as they pursued separate but complementary paths towards service and achievement. Ashley Coleman's transformation had continued through college and into her early career, where her experience with consequences and accountability had shaped her into someone capable of genuine leadership and positive influence that bore little resemblance to the entitled teenager who had once terrorized classmates for entertainment. The court-ordered community service that had initially felt like punishment had evolved into volunteer work that she pursued by choice, finding satisfaction in helping others that had replaced the shallow gratification of social media dominance. The social work degree that Ashley had earned at a state university, rather than the Ivy League institution her parents had originally planned, reflected genuine interest in helping vulnerable populations rather than simply pursuing prestige or financial success. Her thesis on cyberbullying prevention had drawn on her personal experience while contributing to research that was being used to develop more effective intervention strategies for schools and communities facing similar challenges. The nonprofit organization where Ashley now worked as a program coordinator served adolescents who had been victims of various forms of abuse and neglect, providing her with daily reminders of the impact that privileged individuals could have when they chose to use their advantages for positive purposes, rather than personal aggrandizement. Her colleagues respected her dedication and effectiveness while remaining largely unaware of her controversial past, though those who knew her full story appreciated the genuine change she had achieved. Dr. Patricia Reeves, the therapist who had guided Ashley through her court-ordered rehabilitation, continued to monitor her progress through periodic consultations that helped maintain the psychological growth that had been achieved through years of difficult but necessary work. The relationship had evolved from mandatory counseling to voluntary support as Ashley demonstrated consistent commitment to the values and behaviors that marked her genuine transformation from entitled bully to empathetic advocate. Coach Torres had leveraged the attention generated by Sophia's story into a national program that provided martial arts training and emotional support for military children across the country, with federal funding and corporate sponsorship enabling expansion that reached thousands of families who benefited from both physical conditioning and psychological resilience building. The program's success had attracted international attention, with foreign militaries studying the model for potential adaptation to their own family support initiatives. The research study that documented the program's effectiveness had been published in multiple academic journals, while influencing policy decisions about military family support that extended far beyond martial arts training to encompass comprehensive approaches to addressing the unique challenges faced by children whose parents served in dangerous occupations. Torres's work had become a recognized model for evidence-based intervention that produced measurable improvements in both physical fitness and emotional resilience. The invitation to testify before congressional committees about military family support had provided Torres with platforms to advocate for increased funding and recognition of needs that often remained invisible to civilian policymakers who made decisions about military benefits and services. Her military background provided credibility, while her success with the program offered concrete evidence of effective approaches that could be scaled up to serve larger populations. Jake Thompson's success at Stanford had led to graduate school opportunities in international relations, where his undergraduate thesis on loyalty and friendship had evolved into research on alliance building and coalition maintenance that attracted attention from both academic and policy communities, interested in his insights into the personal relationships that underpinned broader diplomatic and military cooperation efforts. The scholarship opportunities that had emerged from Jake's association with Sophia's story had multiplied, as his own academic achievements demonstrated the potential that observers had recognized during his high school years, with fellowship offers that would support doctoral studies while providing research assistantships that connected his work to real-world policy applications. His success served as evidence of the importance of character and loyalty in determining long-term achievement regardless of economic background or initial advantages. The friendship between Jake and Sophia had been maintained despite the geographical separation and security requirements that limited their communication, with both understanding that their bond had been forged during challenging circumstances that revealed character traits which would serve them well throughout their lives. Their occasional meetings during leave periods provided opportunities to reflect on how far they had both traveled from their high school experiences while maintaining the values that had sustained their friendship. The memorial scholarship established in David Martinez's name had provided educational assistance to over 200 military children, while generating awareness about the ongoing costs of military service that extended far beyond the immediate dangers faced by service members in combat zones. The fund's success had inspired similar initiatives across the country, while providing a lasting tribute to David's sacrifice that generated practical benefits for families facing challenges similar to those his own family had overcome. The annual ceremony honoring scholarship recipients provided opportunities for Sophia to speak about her father's legacy, while encouraging young people to pursue their own paths of service and achievement, regardless of the obstacles they might face. Her presentations drew on personal experience, while emphasizing the universal principles of dedication, integrity, and service to others that transcended individual circumstances or career choices. The intelligence analysis that had become Sophia's specialty was contributing to operational success in theaters around the world, where her ability to identify patterns and predict threats was helping protect American personnel and interests while supporting broader diplomatic and military objectives. The recognition she had received for her work included commendations that reflected both technical competence and the kind of strategic thinking that marked her as a future leader within the intelligence community. The promotion opportunities that were becoming available to Sophia required careful consideration of career paths that would allow her to maximize her impact while maintaining the work-life balance that was important for long-term success and personal satisfaction. The mentorship she received from senior officers helped her understand the strategic implications of different assignments while preparing her for leadership responsibilities that would eventually extend far beyond technical analysis to encompass broader operational and policy considerations. The classified nature of much of Sophia's work meant that her contributions to national security would likely remain unknown to the public, though the colleagues who worked with her daily understood the significance of her achievements and the potential for even greater impact as she advanced through increasingly responsible positions. The recognition within professional communities was more meaningful to her than public acclaim, reflecting values that her father had instilled about service being its own reward. The documentary update that was being produced 5 years after the original incident would focus on the long-term positive outcomes that had emerged from what initially appeared to be a traumatic and potentially destructive experience, demonstrating how individual resilience and community support could transform adversity into opportunity for growth and service. The film would serve as inspiration for other families facing similar challenges while providing evidence of the importance of supporting military families through comprehensive assistance programs. The book that Sophia was writing during her off-duty hours drew on her experiences while avoiding classified information that could compromise security, focusing instead on the universal themes of resilience, service, and the importance of maintaining values under pressure that could inspire readers facing their own challenges. The project represented an opportunity to share insights gained through her unique journey, while honoring her father's memory through storytelling that emphasized the positive impact that dedicated individuals could achieve. The speaking engagements that Sophia accepted when her schedule and security requirements permitted provided opportunities to encourage young people, particularly young women, to pursue careers in military service and national security fields where their contributions were desperately needed. Her presentations emphasized the importance of preparation, integrity, and commitment to excellence while demonstrating that success was possible regardless of background or initial circumstances. The mentorship program that Sophia had established for junior officers reflected her understanding of the importance of guidance and support in navigating the complex challenges of military careers while maintaining personal relationships and individual growth. The program's success had led to adoption at other commands while providing a model for peer support that enhanced both professional development and personal resilience among participants. The international recognition that Sophia's work was beginning to receive reflected the global importance of the intelligence analysis that contributed to cooperative efforts between allied nations facing common threats, with her insights helping shape multinational responses to emerging challenges that required coordinated action across geographical and organizational boundaries. The relationships she was building with foreign intelligence professionals would serve American interests for decades to come. The legacy of strength, service, and integrity that David Martinez had hoped to pass on to his daughter had found expression in ways that exceeded even his ambitious expectations for her potential, with Sophia's achievements serving as inspiration for other military children while demonstrating the positive outcomes that were possible when individual potential was nurtured through appropriate support and opportunities. Her story had become proof that heroism could emerge from ordinary circumstances when individuals were prepared to act according to their values despite significant challenges. The transformation of both young women whose confrontation had created unexpected opportunities for growth and service provided powerful evidence that even the most difficult experiences could become catalysts for positive change when approached with wisdom, support, and genuine commitment to learning from mistakes while building character. Their journeys demonstrated that strength could take many forms while emphasizing that true power came from using individual capabilities to serve others and contribute to causes greater than personal advancement or recognition. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.